5 years ago, one of the most destructive hurricanes in U.S. history ravaged parts of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. New Orleans and other southern Louisiana cities were hit the hardest by Hurricane Katrina. Residents had to flee their homes in a hurry. Some didn't make it. Thousands of homes were destroyed. KEYE TV was in Louisiana when the hurricane struck and in the devastating aftermath. Hurricane Katrina, 5 years later, is the subject of tonight's In Depth. August 29, 2005, Hurricane Katrina pounds New Orleans with winds reaching 175 miles per hour. Torrential rainfall and storm surges collapsed the city's levee system, leaving 75% of New Orleans underwater. 5 years later, the images are still haunting. People on rooftops begging to be rescued, thousands waiting for days without food or water. The rescue efforts themselves paralyzed by a delayed response.
We pray that the loss of life is very limited.
The dead unaccounted for. It was utter chaos.
It's a part that I don't speak about. Like people, oh, I heard you were there. Yeah, I was there. What'd you see? Oh, a lot of bad stuff. My stomach starts knotting up whenever I talk about it. So I just don't.
It takes you to a different place when you see this video again. It's hard to describe what that place is, actually.
KEYE TV reporter Keith Elkins and KEYE TV photographer Pedro Garcia were one of the first news crews in the world to arrive in New Orleans hours after Katrina made landfall.
In New Orleans, unbelievable stories, most of them bad.
It's been a living hell.
People been killed here?
Yes.
600 to 700 people already arrested on a variety of charges, more possibly coming later tonight.
I remember seeing shades of like Haiti driving into downtown New Orleans because there were just thousands of people on the sidewalk with all of their belongings in a black plastic bag, or cooking on the sidewalk in a makeshift grill. And that's the only difference between starving or little kids drinking water out of a pothole in the street. And I thought, this is America. This doesn't happen like this. But it did.
It was tough, I imagine, just seeing the devastation turn into desperation and the human misery as well. Describe that, Pedro.
It was miserable. It was hot. But you were in survival mode too. You were in the same conditions as everyone else. Someone once asked me afterwards, what'd you think when you saw all those people? I wouldn't think anything. I was in the same conditions. I was sleeping on the floor with them.
We're asking God to bring us out because it seemed like no one else can.
We ain't got no food or nothing in the house.
So when the storm hit, you were on top of the house and the house was actually floating down the street?
The whole house.
I walked around Harrah's Casino trying to go to the convention center one night, and a 17-year-old kid puts a M1 carbine in my face because he was scared to death. He was there to protect that casino because there's no telling how many millions of dollars was inside that casino. He didn't know who I was. I don't know if I was more scared or if he was.
As America watched the crisis from Katrina unfold, they and the victims themselves were very critical of the government's response or lack of response to help them out.
If I make it out of here alive, I will never return to New Orleans.
How did you feel when you watched these victims crying out for help?
I think after a certain point, I shut myself off. I just shut every emotion I had down and just moved forward. If you look at the video now, as we're driving out, there's people on the side of the road holding their thumbs up, trying to get rides out. And as we get on the freeway, you see a line of sheriff's deputies with shotguns standing there in each lane, waving us through, but telling the people they couldn't walk to safety. And at that point, you can't do anything.
We carried bottles of water and granola bars around with us, not because we necessarily were thirsty or hungry, but because we knew we were going to find people that were. And the police would tell us, don't do that. You're going to create a riot by giving them food. And yet there's dozens and dozens and hundreds of stacks of food and bottled water and things that people could get. FEMA wanted you to stand in a perfectly straight line with an identification card before you could come in and get it. And then if they thought that they'd seen you come more than once, you would be banned from the area because they said they had heard reports that people were trading food or water for sex or drugs.
5 years later, the reflections of covering one of the biggest catastrophes in the nation's history remain strong.
It was a wake-up moment for America. For us to think that government could somehow protect us or save us. It was naive to even think that they should. And I think that was a beginning for us as a country, sociologically, and we're still seeing it. Every time something happens, the BP oil spill is now compared to Hurricane Katrina. Is this President Obama's Hurricane Katrina, the way it was for George W. Bush? And I think that it will always be a moment like that. But if we've learned anything as a country, hopefully it's that if you're going to survive, much the way we had to, you're going to do it yourself. You're going to find a way to carry the gasoline. You're not going to wait for somebody to bring it to you. You're going to find a way to survive with food. You're going to try to help your neighbor.
New Orleans continues to rebuild its neighborhoods and people are slowly moving back. The economy, however, is still lagging, and there's a new challenge, cleaning up the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. This weekend, President Obama will visit New Orleans to mark the 5th anniversary. The mayor there says residents need to stop talking about rebuilding and start dreaming about the city they want New Orleans to become. You can watch extensive clips of Keith, Pedro, and the entire KEYE TV News team's Katrina coverage in Louisiana on weareaustin.com. There you'll find the link in my